Good evening, everyone. Those of you who have joined thus far, and welcome to another edition of the Witching Hour. And I am, of course, your host, Wicca High Priest Beleth. And tonight, of course, as you can see by the description of the video, I will be reading from the Alex Sanders Lectures. I just picked this up recently. I felt compelled to buy some books lately, a lot of books actually. I still have to read them. I'm a little lackadaisical, I have to admit it, at reading by myself. To be quite honest, I tend to like nod out when I'm trying to read, like I'll fall asleep when I'm trying to read, unless I'm reading out loud. So that's why I like to read my books for you guys on a broadcast here, because while I'm reading aloud, I'm less apt to like fall asleep. I don't know why I do that. It's annoying as hell, but anyway. So, I felt compelled to order this book recently, and while I had to look for it, I wanted to make sure that it was still out there. And I found it. It was out there, and it was new too. I got it new, wasn't used. It was brand new, very nicely packaged by the person who sent it to me. And I've always, I've admired Alex. I wish that maybe in a different life we met, and maybe we practiced together in a different life, a different reality. But his way, his approach to learning about oneself is very unique. And it taught me a great deal about how to get to know my own self and how to connect with myself on the inner level. And it's this essential connection to the inner self that one must attain if one is going to be that high priest or high priestess in the Wicca. We must have that connection with the inner self. For it is in this place that we find the Lord and Lady of our religion. They are within us because we are their creation. So the essence, their essence, exists within every part of their creation, including us humans. So within our own selves, I call it the temple of being. Within ourselves, we find this place, this temple of being, and within that temple, we find our true essence, and we find the essence of the Lord and Lady of our worship, our adoration, our love. We find them in there. And Alex Sanders has really set the stage for me back in the day. When I was a young would-be initiate, I'd heard about him, and my teacher, my high priestess, spoke up briefly about him all during my year and a day, my first year and a day. She taught me a little bit about him. She wouldn't let me read from his book, the transcripts, or listen to the tapes until I was initiated. Once I became a first degree initiate, she let me have copies of the audio tapes, and she let me read from the book that she had. And that was when I learned about making that connection with the inner self, meeting oneself on the inner planes, and about the importance of this. And of course, as the years rolled by and my experience, my knowledge grew, I began to understand why that is so important. And the meaning and definition of connecting with oneself is going to be different for everybody. It's a unique experience. No one person can tell somebody else about how their experience is going to play out. So when somebody is learning about these things, about this business about going within and learning about themselves, it's kind of tough because we can't tell them how the trip is going to play out for them. We can give them the tools. We can teach them various techniques for getting within oneself. But from there, it's up to the individual person to begin that journey, that very personal journey. And it's rewarding when a student comes back and says they found it. You know, it's very rewarding when a student comes back and says, hey, you know, I did this, this, and this. I went on a meditation and I did this and this, and I experienced that, and I found myself, and they can actually explain it, what they experienced. It is then when they can explain what they experienced, that's when we know for sure that they made that connection. You know, and it's challenging. It's very challenging to meet oneself. It's very psychologically stressful, and I don't try to downplay that. I will teach that to people, that when you are working with various aspects and characteristics of your own self, it is going to be psychologically stressful. But one has to go through it. They must go through all of that. It is a must, and if a person dedicates themselves fully to this religious and spiritual experience, and it is right for them to do so, and it's natural for them to do so, then they will do it. They will find the strength and the courage within themselves to continue facing themselves and getting to know themselves. And that again is another indication to us as the teachers that we've hit home. We've hit a home run with somebody, so to speak, you know. And it's an acknowledgement that we have found yet another hidden child, and we've helped to bring them home to the mother. You know, and well, Kasasa, that's why there are varying levels of instruction, and there's only certain things that are taught at certain levels of the instruction, you know, because we don't want them to poke their eyeballs out with their wand. You know, so when we do give them the tools, we instruct them carefully about how to use the tools so they don't hurt themselves. And my brother Marcus Agrippa, one, I wanted to it just occurred to me, you've been trying to get my attention and say hello and everything, and I don't mean to ignore you. I just got talking, and so it's good to see you here. And yeah, I saw your comment about how falling asleep when I read means you're getting old and tired like you. Yes, I suppose I'm getting a little older and a little tired, yeah. It doesn't mean I have to like it. I still don't like it. So, reading from his book, Alexander's Transcripts, or Alexander's Lectures, I'm sorry. It's a little bit different than the transcripts. We start with part 1, the Wicca and the Horned God. The etymological origin of the word Wicca is Anglo-Saxon and means the craft of the wise or wisecraft. From here it is but a short step to the debasement of the name to witchcraft, a name which has remained in use since its first recorded employment in approximately 700 AD to the present day to denote the religion of the followers of the old religion, or the craft as it is known to initiates. There are few written records of the old religion in pre-Christian Europe, and those still extant date from soon after the arrival of the missionaries and were made by Christian ecclesiastics, so that allowance must be made for the religious bias of the writers. As was mentioned above, little is known of the early history of the Wicca, since the only historical evidence of the time was written down by the Christians upon their arrival. However, in the Cave de Troyes Frères at Ariège in southern France, there is a Paleolithic painting depicting a man clothed in the skin and wearing on his head the antlers of a stag. The hide of the animal covers the whole of the man's body, the hands and feet being drawn as though seen through a transparent material, thus conveying the information that the figure is a disguised human being and not a stag standing on its hind legs. Around him are various representations of animals which are placed where they can easily be seen by the spectators, while the figure of the Hornet Man can only be viewed from that part of the cavern which is most difficult of access. This fact suggests that a great degree of sanctity was attached to this representation, and that it was purposely placed where it was screened from the gaze of the profane. A like painting of the same period exists in Dordogne, the only difference being that instead of animals, 12 human figures surround the horned god. The end of the Paleolithic period saw the temporary interruption of the cave paintings until the arrival of the Bronze Age. Now the Hornet Man is found again in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. In the Near East, the figures were either male or female, and the horns were those of cattle, sheep, or goats. The stag antlers are lacking, possibly because the stag did not occur in those lands, or else was so uncommon as not to be of importance as a food animal. Horned gods were common in both Babylon and Assyria. The copperhead found in one of the gold tombs at Ur is very early, possibly dating from before the time of the first Egyptian dynasty. That is, before Menes united the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt in 3200 BC. In Egypt, too, horned gods were in plentiful supply. The chief of these was Amun-Ra, originally the local deity of Thebes, later the supreme god of the country, and is usually represented in human form, wearing the curved horns of the Theban ram. But the greatest of all the horned gods of Egypt was Osiris, who appears to have been the pharaoh in his aspect of the incarnate god. The crown of Osiris, of which the horns were an important part, was also the crown of the monarch, indicating to all who understood the symbolism that the king as god was the giver of all fertility. The Indian figures of the horned god found at Mohenjo-Daro are of the earliest Bronze Age. There are many examples, and in every case it is clear that a human being is represented, either masked or horned. The most remarkable figure is that of a man with a bull's horns on his head, sitting cross-legged and, like the Ariège figure, surrounded by animals. This representation may be the predecessor of a Shiva. It is called Pasupati, Lord of Animals. Pasupati, Lord of Animals. Though it is not possible to give an exact date to the early legends of the Aegean, it is nevertheless evident that the horned god flourished throughout the Bronze and Iron Ages. The best known, on account of the dramatic legends attached to his cult, was the Minotaur, the offspring of a foreign bull and a Cretan queen. The sanctity of the ram in the Aegean in the early Bronze Age is shown in the legend of Hel and Phrixus. Of the horned gods on the mainland of Greece, Pan is the best known of the modern world, and in fact, when modern witches wish to use an image of the horned god, it is generally either a representation of Pan or Osiris that is used, the legendary death and resurrection of the latter being very akin to the witches' belief on the legendary beginnings of the Wicca as a fertility cult. A few rock carvings in Scandinavia show that the horned god was known there also at the time of the Bronze Age. It was only when Rome started on her career of conquest that any written records were made of the gods of Western Europe, and these records show that a horned deity, whom the Romans called Cernunnos, pronounced Carnena, Carnena, meaning simply the horned, was the supreme deity of Gaul. The importance of this deity may be shown by reference to the altar found under the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. The date of this altar is well within the Christian era. On three sides are figures of minor gods represented as small beings, but on the fourth is the head of Carnena, in gigantic proportion as compared to the others. He has a man's head, and like the Ariege painting, he wears stag's antlers, these being further decorated with rings of withy. Like his Paleolithic prototype, he is bearded, but in accordance with the Roman artistic ideas, the deity is not masked, the horns and appendages being fixed to the head. This particular deity was most probably the god of the witches, since he conforms in every respect to the picture of the god worshipped by them. The other possibility is that of Pan, Dionysus, or Bacchus, since all these deities are horned, and all are directly concerned with Saturnalia and other rites connected with fertility. Of the old faith in pre-Christian Britain, there are, as usual, but few records. But as Dr. Murray says, it is contrary to all experience that a cult should die out and leave no trace immediately on the introduction of a new religion. The so-called conversion of Britain meant the superficial conversion of the rulers only. The mass of the people continued to follow their ancient customs and beliefs with a very thin veneer of Christian rites. In the case of the conversion of the various tribes, the religion of the time was that of the tribe, and thus when the king was converted to Christianity, the tribe generally followed its leader's example. However, these conversions were purely nominal in the majority of cases, and very often the king's successor reverted to the old religion. But whatever the religion of their leaders, the mass of people adhered, at least in private, to the religion of their ancestors. Quite often, the two religions existed side by side, as was the case with Redwald, king of the East Saxons, who, quote, in the same temple had an altar to sacrifice to Christ and another small one to offer victims to devils, end quote. This latter reference is strange, since the witches, or more properly the worshippers of the horned god, are only concerned with life and rebirth, not with death, and never in the course of the known history of the religion has any sacrifice of any living thing taken place. Indeed, were it not for the fact that the economy at that time was based primarily on hunting, the Wicca might well have forbidden the killing of any living creature whatsoever. There is one exception to this, however, but that will be dealt with at the proper time. There are thus two possible explanations for this passage. The first is that Redwalds belonged to some other cult, possibly that of the Druids, who did sacrifice both men and animals. The other is that Beatty may have been speaking in a metaphorical sense, and that there was no letting of blood involved. The existence of the old religion is proved by reference to the another word I can't pronounce, Liber Poenitentialis of Theodore. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that word. Archbishop of Canterbury, 668 to 690, which contains the earliest ecclesiastical laws of England, consisting of a list of offenses and a punishment due for each. Not only celebrating feasts in the abominable, this is a quote, not only celebrating feasts in the abominable places of the heathen and offering foods there, but also consuming it. If anyone at the calends of January goes about as a stag or a bull, that is, making himself into a wild animal and dressing in the skin of an herd animal, and putting on the heads of beasts, those who in such wise transform themselves into the appearance of a wild animal, penance for 3 years, because this is devilish. I'm tripping over my words, I'm sorry. Later, in the 8th century, under the heading Law of the Northumbrian Priests, if then anyone be found that shall henceforth practice any heathenship, either by sacrifice or by flirt, or in any way love witchcraft, or worship idols, if he be a king's thane, let him pay X half marks, half to Christ, half to the king. We are all to love and worship on God, and strictly hold one Christianity, and totally renounce all heathenship. And very much later still, in the 11th century, in the laws of King Canute, 1017-1035, we earnestly forbid every heathenism. Heathenism is that men worship idols, that is, heathen gods, and the sun or the moon, fire or rivers, water wells or stones, or forest trees of any kind, or love witchcraft, or promote morth work of any kind. The reference to idols here is a little obscure, since there are no images of the hornet god. The best the followers of the old religion could do, therefore, was to worship menhirs, a French word meaning boulders, or more properly, a pointed rock. These, as are trees, are phallic symbols, symbols of fertility. The priests of Elagabal, a Syrian deity, whose cult flourished under the Roman Emperor Varius Antoninus, used to worship their god under the guise of a pointed rock. The idea was that their actions, which included masturbation upon the rock, would give their god, symbolized by the sun, the power to rise again the next day. Although strange in worship, this religion was certainly totemic in nature. The witches never worshipped their god in this manner, but it is easy to comprehend the fact that phallic symbolism in worship had a large following in those days. It is virtually impossible to understand the witch cult without first comprehending the position of the deities of the Wicca. The god, whose name is a closely guarded secret, but who is called in general the Hornet God, was known to his Christian contemporaries as the devil, which was called by them Satan, more correctly Shaitan, Lucifer, more correctly Lucifuse the Lightbringer, Beelzebub, and other names appropriate to the devil of the scriptures, with whom they identified him. Marcus, did you mean stag, the symbolism of the stag within traditional witchcraft? No, because buffaloes don't count as stags. I don't believe so. They're not. Although there is, I think there's definitely, the symbolism, I think, is similar. Because didn't Native Americans wear buffalo skins? I don't know, buffalo skins were worn, but I think that was a matter of elements, protecting oneself against elements. I think it was more as clothing. What is that you're saying? It is stang, not stag? A stang is a, what? Now I'm getting a little bit confused because short pole with two horns at the top. What are you saying? Oh, the phallic symbolism? Is that what you were talking about? A short pole with two horns at the top. A stang? What is that for? I've never heard of that. They use stag horns for their depictions of a man with horns. That's something. I might have to ask my my fellow elder high priestess about that stang. I never heard of it. So yeah, the Christians, of course, read into our beliefs and into our rights whatever they were going to, and it became over time. it was debased. It was debased. It was what's the other word? Bastardized, or it was taken to a level it was intended to go. So you're saying this stang, this short pole with two horns at the top, is a traditional symbol of the horned one? But it still represents, the stang might be the actual object that is used, but it still represents and symbolizes the stag, right? So yes, he was known to Christian contemporaries as the devil, Shaitan or Lucifuge, Beelzebub, many others. People who have done any kind of studying into at least LaVeyan Satanism would know about Anton LaVey's list of infernal names. And Beelzebub and Lucifuge actually were two names that were on that list of infernal names. They were in the hierarchy of hell, basically. Lucifuge was like a demonic treasurer of sorts. And Beelzebub, well, he was the Lord of Flies, if I'm correct. But in any case, we know that their explanations were inaccurate, completely inaccurate. That was their way of explaining that which they feared. They ultimately feared it, is what they did. You know, they feared these things. It was not among their, it was not in keeping with their teachings. So they had to do something to, they demonized it. They had to. What do you mean the stags use that one quarter of the horns and the goat horn and another, the ram's horn? I think this is, I'm sorry to say, Marcus, but this is creating, I think, a lot of confusion. I don't know where this is coming from. This object, this short pole with the horns at the top, being a stang, I never heard of it up until this point. I never heard of it, but I mean, but you're quite a bit older and wiser. You've been around a lot longer than I have, so I imagine you know what you're talking about. It's just that I have never heard of it, never seen it either. And I've always heard it referred to as stag. That's what we use as symbolism. The horns, the stag, the animal. So okay, thank you. But is that in any way used, is the stang, as you're saying, is that in any way used as symbolism for a stag? Or is it completely different symbolism? That's where I'm getting confused. Like, so they would, you know, when would this be used or how? Well, Costanza, we're talking about two different beliefs. You know, and so maybe, possibly, so the Lakota did use buffalo horns, but were they using the buffalo horns in the same manner as we would use the stag horns? Were they using it for basically the same thing? Were they using that to symbolize their deity as they understood it? Because that's what we do with the stag horns. You know, so it is, yes, definitely, if they were using it for that purpose. Okay, the reason for this mudslinging was twofold, and that's the mudslinging, you know, with the Christians throwing out that word devil out about our God. It was twofold. As first, not comprehending the situation, the missionaries mistook the horned god for their own devil on account of certain visual similarities, namely the horns and animal likeness. On their realization of the true state of affairs, they also realized that the Wicca was a firmly established religion that constituted a grave threat to the survival of Christianity. Thus, every means available had to be used to suppress this rival, and it was the Wicca itself that provided the main excuse in the person of the horned god. The goddess, whose name is also secret, is of great significance to the witches themselves, although she is hardly known to the outside world. The Wicca is matriarchal in basis, and most prayers are directed to the goddess. The legend of the deities of the cult is very akin to that of Isis and Osiris in Egyptian mythology. In the latter, symbolically, Osiris gives his power to Isis, and in the same way, the horned god is so enchanted by the youth and beauty of the goddess that he gave all his powers to her. In the coven, the high priestess is a spiritual leader, although the high priest often runs the external affairs of the coven. The worship of the horned god continued well into properly documented historic times. In 1303, the Bishop of Coventry was accused before the Pope of doing homage to the devil in the form of a sheep. The fact that a man in so high a position as a bishop could be accused of practicing the old religion shows that worship of the horned god was far from dead, and that it was in all probability still the chief worship of the bulk of the people. But the bishop's high position in the Christian hierarchy saved him from punishment, as was the case of Lady Alice Kyteler in 1324 when she was tried before the Bishop of Ossory for her heathen beliefs. Although Lady Alice escaped, her commoner co-religionists were burned, showing that there was ample evidence on hand. The most famous recorded example of the continuance of the old religion was the case of the Countess of Salzburg in the reign of King Edward III. She, while dancing with the king, dropped her garter and was at once overcome with confusion. The king, however, picked it up, fastened it upon his own leg, and said, "Ani soit qui mal," I don't know what the hell it says, "evil to him who thinks evil." It had always been assumed by the uninformed that it was quite natural for a lady to be embarrassed by the loss of so personal an article of apparel. However, the ladies of that period were inured to rough talk, and it took more than a dropped garter to shock them. The truth of the matter was that the garter was a badge of rank in the Wicca, and it showed that she was not only a worshiper of the horned god, but also held a high position therein, possibly that of high priestess. When the king attached the offending article to his own person, he was, in effect, placing himself in the position of the incarnate God in the eyes of his pagan subjects. Not content with his action in saving his dancing partner, he then instituted the noble order of the garter with 26 knights, 2 covens, one for the king, one for the Prince of Wales. It is equally remarkable that the king's mantle as chief of the order is powdered over with 168 tiny garters, which, with his own garter worn on the leg, makes 169, or 13 times 13, i.e. 13 covens. This attribution may be entirely coincidental, but nevertheless, it fits the fact so perfectly that it cannot be ignored. Boy, am I having trouble with my voice tonight. Maybe I need to try and find something to drink. Maybe I should. So I think what we can all be agreed on is that this spirituality, this religion of ours, Wicca, is very, very old indeed. And I know a lot of people out there in the world, a lot of people argue about the fact that, and I've heard it said many times, that Wicca's only 50 years old. 50, 60 years old. Gerald Gardner created it in the 50s or 60s or whatever. And it's definitely not the case. I mean, he took what was already existing and he built a philosophy and a practice around it, and then brought it out publicly, and put the using a name that was probably already there. But we, the initiates who were raised in the traditional ways, we've had a lot of things that were handed down to us word of mouth that was not in print. So, and we know what we know. And we know that this path of ours, this spirituality, is old, very, very old, and handed down through generations. And I can only hope that it surpasses me and all the people I've never ever known in this life, that it will continue. And that's what I'm doing when I teach this stuff. As I'm doing what I can to ensure the continuity of the craft as I understood it and as I have been taught. So by doing this, I am ensuring will continue. My hope, of course, is that the people I teach will also teach themselves as time goes on, and that also their ability to pass it on is there. The goddess gave me that ability. Goddess and the god, both collectively, they have provided many things for me. None, the least of which is my spiritual life. My psychological health, the things that I have in my life, which I try to be thankful for, and I try to remember to thank them. Every chance that I get, I thank them because of the things that I have in my life, my very life itself. I don't need people who don't know really the religion as the way that I know it, who are not initiates. I don't need to listen to them, and I don't need them telling me, where the bear crapped in the buckwheat, because I know exactly. Oh, now that looks like something that could be held during a ceremony, like maybe the chief of the tribe, or a high priest would hold it. It's like a staff. Yeah, it's like holding a staff. And I see that word is actually used, staff. Stang or staff made of twisted oak with a forked antler top and set with a garnet. The copper band with brass pentacle detail. Beautiful. That's the one at the bottom. What are we talking about casting a full circle with? Kusasa, what are you using? Oh, candles? Blue, yellow, green, red, purple. Use a candle in the middle, huh? How can you cast a full circle without them? Are you talking about candles? You can cast as a full circle. The candles, they're fairly symbolic. The candles are placed at the quarters as sort of like to denote the portal at that particular quadrant. If you're asking, can it be done without candles? It could be done, obviously. But if you're intending on working at night, it's better to use candles than, say, room lighting for what you're doing. It's the whole symbolism of it. I've always used candles, so I can't imagine ever doing my rites without candles. It's just the way it is. Somebody is having night terrors. What do you, Niriana? When you say you have tried before but failed, what do you mean? Can you elaborate a little bit on what you did? I'm curious as to. I want to know what you think you mean when you say that you failed. Yeah, it does take discipline to work without physical tools. But I always have. And if that makes me weaker, pettier, or something, I'm sorry, but I like those. I enjoy the trappings, you know. And if you're not using the physical stuff and you're just totally in your head, then you're totally in your head, I guess. Yeah, and you shouldn't just do a circle casting willy-nilly just because you think you can. You have to understand the reason why you're casting a circle. So, Niriana, why were you casting circles for? What purpose? And I always, I guess with my level, I use a sword most of the time to cast a circle. Although the alchemy is just good for doing it. I like using my sword to do it. And yes, that's true, Marcus. The all this stuff, the physical trappings of the whole ritual helps the group focus, helps the group mind to focus on the work. Well, I mean, I've heard people talk about that, Marcus, casting in your head, but it takes practice. Um, if if you're doing that, that would be okay if you're doing some solo work, but that's not going to work in a group. You know, in a coven, that would be impractical. I mean, you might as well not even have a group meeting then. Oh, nice stones. Pretty. I see some hematite. I see a couple pieces of hematite there. And is that carnelian? I think one of them is carnelian. And I see what it looks like. No, I thought it looked like something. I don't know. I'm not any kind of a expert in that area. Pretty though. Oh boy, so we have somebody who thinks they've been cursed and they need some help. I'll take this one. Oh, they quit even before I can ask. Yeah, at Cerro, that was one of my feelings. Is that one of them? A couple of them looked like it was cut glass, like that looked like stones. They made to look like stones. So it could have been glass. It wasn't even a live person that gave them to me. Who gave them to you? Where'd they come from? Miriana? Ah, the candles, yeah. So were they asking if the candles were absolutely necessary? Is that what the question was? So I don't have too much left to this passage. So I figured I was gonna finish reading this part of the lectures, the first part. So so they're talking about using, okay, 26 nights, right? Okay, so the underlying meaning of the divine victim is that the Spirit of God takes up its abode in a human being, usually the king, but it may be any other leader who thereby becomes the giver of fertility to the people. Among other privileges, his person becomes inviolate until his time comes. This is the origin of the divine right of kings. After a set number of years, the king is put to death to ensure the Spirit of God will not grow old like its human abode. The term of years was generally either 7 or 9, but it varied according to circumstances. The principle of the divine victim is very old, and nearly every cult has practiced it at some stage in their history. Osiris was one, Jesus Christ was another, to name only two of the best known examples, while two of the best known Wiccan victims are William Rufus and Joan d'Arc. William II, Rufus, resigned for precisely 13 years, from 1087 to 1100. He was accidentally shot in the back with an arrow in the New Forest. An interesting fact about him is that Rufus, meaning red, is the color of witches. The true witch's hair color is red, not black, as is popularly supposed. Jeanne d'Arc, the Maid of Orleans, was a Pucelle, or high priestess of the Wicca, and was condemned to death for what she was, one of the strongest accusations being that she wore men's clothing, a thing at that time done only by witches. The fact, too, that she, a mere nobody, commanded an almost fanatical body of troops, showed that she must have held an extremely important position in Wicca, and as God incarnate until her time had come, her person was inviolate. It is also significant that she, like the other divine victims such as William Rufus, Thomas Becket, Giles de Rey, and Jesus Christ, made absolutely no attempt to save herself by word or deed, but rather willed her death. This is the only time that Wicca will ever draw blood. Modern witches still worship the Hornet God in the same way as did their ancestors. The four great Sabbats, Candlemas, February 1st, Beltane, April 30th, Lammas, August 1st, and Samhain, October 31st, are still celebrated in the same way as they were hundreds, even thousands of years ago, with dancing and feasting in honor of the god. While witches generally work naked, a fact which offends the sensibilities of delicately nurtured persons, orgies never occur at Sabbats. In fact, to quote a well-known and respected witch, nudity soon loses its novelty, and most of us are more attractive to the opposite sex when we have a few clothes on. Herbal potions are still prepared by the ones who know the secrets of preparing them, and many of these potions were used hundreds of years before science invented them. The art in this respect is declining, and fewer witches trouble themselves with the learning of the ancient secrets. In all other respects, witchcraft is a thriving religion, and in spite of the fact that it refuses to countenance any form of proselytization, people, mostly the young, come all the time to high priests asking for initiation. Such as are deemed fit for initiation are rarely persuaded to leave, and since the Wicca is a way of life as well as a religion, they willingly follow its instructions. As for the practical point of view, the code of the Wicca may be summed up in 2 lines from the Book of Shadows, the Witch's Bible. 8 words the wicked read, fulfill, and it harm none. Do what ye will. And that is the end of the first section of the Alexander's Lectures. 8 words the wicked read, fulfilled, and it harm none. Do as ye will. I think that those words are probably the most important. That in itself, those 8 words say a lot about how things go, how we do things. You know, just those simple 8 words can spawn an entire volume in one's psyche about what the Wicca is. You know, 8 words we can read, fulfill, and it harm none. Do what you will. You can do anything you want, be whatever you want in the Wicca, so long as what you do does not harm anyone. We don't cast offensive spells, offensive magic. You know, if somebody does offensive magic to us, tries to hurt us, we defend ourselves. That's what we do. We use the knowledge for defense only, never for outright attack. Many of you know the story I told about. I had a Satanist who viciously attacked me with a curse that was designed to have my body excuse my French, have my body waste away, turn my own body against me. I started having physical complications. For like 3 or 4 months, I had rather severe physical complications of this curse. I dropped a ton of weight, you know, and it's quite possible that if I hadn't discovered what he was doing, maybe it could have killed me, but I did what I had to do. I defended myself. So, but that's just one example. We don't do those things, and it's unless they're the last resort. Magic should never be done just because you can. You know, it would be too easy. You know, it'd be too easy just to work the magic because you can. You know, so it's always better to exhaust all physical measures of attaining one's ends, for whatever they may be. You know, and if in the end you need to use magic to kind of push along what you've already done physically to attain your desire, well, that's fine. But either way, you should always be doing something on the physical level to help it along. Even if you do magic first, you should always do something on physical level that's going to help the magic along. Oh, my voice is very scratchy tonight. So does anyone have any comments or questions? Yes, Kizasa, I saw, I did see that you had said that earlier. So that much like us, we use the staghorns to represent our spiritual father, I guess, right? Oh, and yes, they were asking if the candles were mandatory. Well, I suppose not. But since we always do our workings at night, it's more or less, it becomes mandatory. because we're certainly not going to use room lighting, for artificial room lighting. No, we're supposed to be stepping outside of the, trying to get rid of the bounds of the physical world. So the candles are used to light the circle and light the area we're working in. Trying to cut out all parts of the physical world around us. Herny, yeah, I heard the god Herny. That's the one form. Atsuro, I think that's a little bit advanced, right? When you're talking about calling help from other beings in the astral, that's a little bit advanced, right? Joan of Arc. We know her better as Joan of Arc, but Joan d'Arc was how it was written in the book, but Joan of Arc. Not they're already projecting fine. And do we know that this Zambella is projecting fine? Do we already know that? I only saw part of the conversation. They're talking about dreams. They're talking about night terrors. Wow, they've been through sleep studies and they say that the brain never reaches rapid eye movement sleep. That's what you have to dream. You have to reach REM sleep to dream. I project more than I want to. Like I just been having night terrors to the point I wake up. But I don't think they mean the same thing that you mean. Interesting. No, Joan of Arc never claimed to be a male. She was dressed in men's clothing. She dressed in clothing that was typically for men to wear. It was typical and she was apparently, from what Alex has said in his lectures here, that she was a Wiccan high priestess. But what I find, what I really like about Alex is that he tells it like it is, and there's a lot of information that he puts out there that in his books here, in his writings, that really explains it very well. Even if it's not understood right away, I think it sinks into the psyche. I think the psyche understands it. And then down the road a piece, the more you study about yourself and the more traveling inside yourself and studying yourself, I think the knowledge kind of coalesces and you begin to really truly understand what he's trying to say. So yeah, just the fact that he's clarified a lot of stuff I feel about the age of our practice, of our religion. And, as I said already, I will never, it doesn't matter to me what people who are on the outside looking in, they want to say this, that, and the other thing about how old Wicca is. They want to make an argument. I know what Alex has said. And since I know about Alex having had this unique connection to the inner planes, the inner level on those planes, that's where he learned a lot about what he knew. I can only guesstimate. I can only say that's more than all I need to clarify. Oh, my voice is so rough tonight. So, I think I need to really give my voice a rest. So anyway, I think I'm gonna say goodnight, people. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed at this point. So I'm feeling tired and sleepy, and I don't know, I get this a lot. There's nothing physically wrong either. I don't know why I feel this way. But anyway, I will of course be back with you again next week. And hopefully in better shape. I won't feel so rough and around the edges, but I'm feeling rough around the edges, that's for dang sure. So, Kazasa, why are you, no offense, but that's like the third or fourth time that you've said that. I did see it, and I even said that I saw it. I did see it. I did. I did see it. What am I what else, what am I supposed to be saying about that? All I can do is acknowledge that you have said that you like to draw parallels between different belief systems. In Lakota, they use buffalo horns to represent Tunkan Shila, spiritual grandfather. And when I read that before, I said, well, that it goes along almost like with the Wicca, we think, and the horns represent our God, our spiritual father. And I said that before. So, again, I don't know what you want me to say about that, but I have acknowledged that I've seen it 2 or 3 times now, 4 times. Okay? No offense, but you don't need to be posting it all that many times. I've seen it. So, is Charity saying that just to get my goat, or is she serious? I'm not even going to enter into that. I've already said my piece about what I know about the Wicca. So I've already established that it doesn't matter to me what other people try to raise as an argument, because I, as an initiate, I know better. I definitely know better. So, anyway, like I said, I'm going to get off for now, people. My throat is really bothering me a lot. So I'm going to get off for now, and I'll see you all again next week. And we'll get into some more good stuff, and I'll probably read more from this book. Comedic Witchcraft over in my YouTube chat. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing what you're writing over there. I didn't know. Did you say something in the other room about that? Maybe you should have said something in the other room. I thought that you were in both rooms. Lady Ambrosia. She wants to do an interview. Non-eclectic perspective. I would love to talk about that. I'm definitely not a non-eclectic. I follow a specific set tradition. Anyway, maybe we can get into that next week. So anyway, people, I want to say good night, blessed be, and merry part, and until we merry meet again next week. And have a good night, everyone. Blessed be.